What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I'm going to be reviewing Star Wars Jedi Survivor. So before I get in, I want to talk a little bit about some stats, performance, those kind of exterior things before we talk about, the meat of the game. So I play this on PS5 to beat the main game and to beat a lot of secondary things. So we're talking rumors, we're talking some bounties, collectibles, things like that. 16 and a half hours is how long it took me to beat that. Now, since then, I'm recording this on Monday. Sunday night, I put in a couple more hours. I beat all of the bounties. So bounties are completely done, and I've put in about 18 and a half hours into this game. There is still more there, and the reason why I go over the length of time is, well, how long is the game? Well, I think if you're not rushing, you're just kind of going through, I think a 16 to 18 hour thing is what you're going to find. But if you're trying to do everything, I can see this game getting into the 25, 30 hour range. Performance issues, well, let's talk about that just very briefly. So I fully understand people have had the worst times of their lives playing this game. Okay, I get depending on the system or the platform and also just what day it is, and if you're lucky or unlucky, the game may be completely unplayable. Okay, I fully understand that. For me, the performance was never too bad. There were two different times, I should say, in the game where things happen. One was the first time you go to the Shattered Moon. You were there about 50 or so minutes, or at least I was. The issues were apparent. There was a lot of frame rate issues. I believe that is at the time that the game actually just did a black screen when I was trying to fast travel. There was another time towards the end of the game, well, maybe 60-70% in, you're going to the observatory on Kobo, so you're very, very high up, right, like altitude. It looks beautiful when it's running, but the game had some trouble there as well. But overall performance wasn't really an issue for me. So just wanted to throw those in so you guys kind of got a feel of, okay, well, did performance ruin his experience or anything? Those were the only two times it did anything, and it did not ruin it. And beyond that, the game ran fine for me personally. All right, the game itself. I really, really like this game. Now, I said that in my impressions video. I played the game 10 hours, put up a video, talked about how much I like it, but there were some things holding it back. I'm willing to say, and I'm willing to actually move it up and say, this is a game that's a few steps away from being legendary, it's a Game of the Year contender for me, most likely, but I don't think I would give it Game of the Year. And it's because there's a few things holding it back. I'd also say maybe it's not my favorite Star Wars game of all time, but it's close. There's so many very strong things about this game, but there's just a few things getting in its own way. So the story, I think, is really, really good. Now, what actually ends up happening, the weakest part of the entire game, I think, is there's a lull, maybe from like 40% in to 60% in. Now, I had just yesterday did a full story explain, so I went over the entire game, and myself, I watched the game back. Okay, it took me like 15-20 hours to make that video yesterday. I watched the whole game back, and you kind of look at it a little bit different and say, okay, the story when it's firing is fantastic, and at least for right now, I'm not going to get into spoilers. If I do, which I may, I'll let you guys know. When the game kicks it up a notch, it does. There are some legendary, and I mean this, legendary moments in this game. Now, they tend to be in the second half of the game, so they are more spoiler, driven. But when the game is firing, even in a more kind of quiet atmosphere, I've mentioned scenes with like Marin and Cal sitting together by a fire. There's a lot of character-driven scenes in this. They evolve the characters, and I saw a review, I think it was Mr. Maddie Plays, that talked about how in this game, from Fallen Order, he went from liking characters to loving characters. I think I'd second that. I liked Marin, maybe in the same way that a lot of people liked Marin, where it's like, okay, well, you kind of ship her and Cal, and she's really cool, but in reality, you don't know too much about her. Cal even, he's good. He's a good character in Fallen Order, but is he great? Is he like, a staple? And I agree with him. I think in this game, they took these characters, and I mean, I can honestly go one by one. I think Cal is an incredible character that they really did some stuff with his personality of why he's fighting, why he feels he needs to fight, he can't stop, people are telling him to stop. The way that he goes about things, I love. I think he's a phenomenal character. Marin, I think, is great. She's definitely a secondary piece. She's a support character, but I love that. I love that about her. I think she fits that role perfectly. Love her and Cal together. We won't get into spoilers, but I love them whenever they're together on screen in this game. Grease, I think, is phenomenal. He was more of like a comedic relief in the first game. This game, he still is, but has that extra level. He's a more detailed person. Seer, She's a little bit more in the backdrop, so it's a little bit harder. Maybe she's one that didn't fully take a step forward. Bode, I think, is a phenomenal new character. He is awesome. And again, without getting into spoilers, I mean, they do some really interesting things with him. So the cast of characters in this game is, honestly, now we are in that legendary territory. The story, I don't know if it's legendary. It's solid, but it has some epic moments when it's firing. The issue, as I said, kind of going back, there's some times in this game where you'll have to go through an hour or two of platforming and fighting to get to that story. Then once you do that, you'll be told, oh, we got to go somewhere else. Okay, let's go somewhere else. And then we're told we have to go somewhere again. There is no joke, a part of this game where you land on Kobo. That's your objective, is to go from one place. I think maybe it's Jeddah, but you go from one place to Kobo, okay? So you go to Kobo, and you're told you have to go somewhere else. So you literally just change objectives, you kind of change directions, and you do something else. And there's just a couple of those scenes throughout the game, and you could say, well, Alex, it's just a couple. Well, yeah, it's a couple, but when you do that, that's like an hour, right? There's these planets, some of them at least, are ginormous. So when you're going through it, you can, no joke. I mean, again, I've timed myself. I recorded my entire time playing this game. There are hours and hours of chunks that if you're just looking for the story, you could eliminate. You could take out all of the gameplay, because there are sometimes sections of 1 to 2 hours where it is just platforming, running along walls, grappling, fighting battle droids, fighting Bedlam Raiders. Now, it's not like complete garbage. I'm not saying it's awful, but they slow down quite a bit, and they choose to do it right in the middle of the game. So it starts strong, it ends strong, maybe even like 70% on, at the end of the game is really good. But they decide that middle of the game is a lot of explanations, which is what they do, but then also just, okay, we're going to have you fight a lot, we're going to have you come up with some puzzles, or you're going to have to solve some puzzles, and I definitely got bored. I mean, I definitely got tired of that stuff, and the combat's great. I mean, we talked about that in the impressions video. It's not overhauled too much, in fact, almost not at all. The stances are the newest improvement, and the only thing really they added, but you know what? The combat's fantastic. The camera gets pretty messy. The lock-on system is still just as much of a joke as it was in Fallen Order. I'm pretty disappointed that wasn't touched at all, but the combat is at its core incredible. Okay, I love the idea of studying the enemy, the Soulsborne kind of stuff, but it's Star Wars. So you're memorizing how enemies move, you're blocking or parrying with a lightsaber. Now you have 5 stances. Now I actually was very boring. I used the default. I just used a single lightsaber for, I'd say, 75% of this game. I just use one lightsaber. It's what I'm the best at. I feel the most confident in surviving the game at, doing that, and it worked. So we also, I mentioned jumping around planets, and some of these planets are huge. So there's not too many. I don't know if giving away the number of planets would actually spoil the game. So let's just say like a 5, 6, 7 kind of range. There's really not that many. And you go back, Kobo, Jeddah, even like the Shattered Moon, those 3, you are going to go back there more than you can even imagine. In fact, Kobo itself, I think you go to Kobo maybe 6 or 7 times just in the story. It kind of gets ridiculous. And also, Kobo is so big, there are some things hidden in Kobo that I don't know how they actually did it, because that planet never stops growing. But, at the same time, the planets are really good. They are really diverse. There's different enemy groups that you're going to find there. There's different collectibles. They make it kind of worth your while to go off the beaten path. And like I said, the platforming, now I think if you're doing like 20 out of 30 minutes is platforming in a Star Wars game like this, I do think that's an issue. I think that's too much, but it's not because the platforming is, say, god-awful. I like running along walls. When you get all your abilities, when you're dashing through things, when you're using your grapple hook, when you're doing all this, the game's really fluid. Cal moves really nicely. So it's not bad. I hope I'm getting that through. It's not atrociously bad. It feels good. But the fact of, if you're doing it like 75% of the time in one little zone, it can become overbearing. It's like, all right, well, I want to hear the story. Let's get to these characters. Let's fight. I think the platforming, maybe you even do more than you fight in this game, at least in certain, circumstances. So that is, I would say, at its core, that is actually what hurts this game the most. When it's firing, it is great, but it gets lost in, honestly, I kind of predicted this, so it's not all that surprising. The bigger means better kind of thing, that when we talked about that leading into Jedi Survivor, making Koboh this place that'll take you 15 hours to explore doesn't necessarily mean that's a good thing, right? I'd actually prefer, like, a Dathomir in the first game, I think is really great. I still think it's up there and maybe better than more than half the planets in this game. I like the enemies. I like how it's, situated, how you get from point A to point B. I really like that planet. And there's a couple small planets in Jedi Fallen Order that I actually probably would have taken. I mean, I said this in my impressions video. If you cut out maybe 20-30% of what I would consider maybe fluff of getting from point A to point B in this game, now you'd be taking, like I said, 20-30%. Maybe you're taking 2 hours off the total time, right? You just shave that off. I think you get a better game. I do believe you actually get a better game because of that. And obviously they didn't do it. They decided, well, we're going to give you all these bounties. You're going to have to go from point A to point B and then do it again like 6 different times, go backwards. And that hurts the game. I do personally believe that hurts the game, because if that wasn't there, you'd be left with just all the greatest elements of the game. And like I said, like at its core, fighting is still great. So if you go back to fighting, even if it's just the same thing as Fallen Order, it's still fantastic. I think now's the time. I do want to talk about a couple spoiler elements just to kind of highlight some of the epicness, some of the bigger moments in this game. So let's do that. Let's jump to a spoiler half kind of review. If you guys want to leave, leave now. So let's talk about a couple things. Darth Vader being one. Jesus Christ. He's awesome. I mean, that fight, I told my wife when I was playing it, it's like, okay, he's so much bigger. Like, that's the first thing I noticed about him. Well, number one, he fights very much how you think Vader fights. Very kind of like straightforward slices. Love that. Love that they kind of kept his fight. Even how he uses the Force to get him out of situations. A lot of it's actually kind of mirrored, even though the Obi-Wan show I kind of overall hated. He fights very similar. So I did really like that. But he's also just so big. Like, he's so menacing. So when you're fighting him as Seer, it's like, holy God, you stand no chance. But you do. You do stand a chance. But she just, she missed that last little jab. But I thought he was an excellent addition to the game. I didn't know, Fallen Order, you used him. Would you use him again? I think they used him better, this time than they did in Fallen Order. Boba Fett, even, if you do all the... I didn't record this, so Boba Fett, if you do all the bounties in the game, you actually get a cutscene with Boba Fett. That's freaking awesome. So there's a couple moments like that, but even the story, okay? So I mentioned the Cal Marin thing. I'm very glad that they got together. I think obviously a lot of people wanted them to get together, myself included. So them finally, or Cal finally saying like, hey, I like you. Okay, like, for the love of God, I like you, and I know that Jedi aren't supposed to, but I do. I think she responds with like, it took you long enough. So that's exactly right, Marin. That's how I felt as well. So I love that. I thought those two were great. And, not just like their love interest, but maybe one of my favorite moments in the entire game is when Cal starts to really lose himself, right? When he's about to kill Denvik, and then Marin talks him out of it, says, hey, we've all lost people like this. You got to stop. You got to knock this off. I loved it. I think she has a couple speeches throughout this game, and even some of the more, again, character-driven moments. Cal talking about he's afraid of losing himself, right? When he sees himself in Dagon, and he says, what if I lose myself? And she says, well, number one, you have a better support system, but number two, if you do lose yourself, the group, us, will guide you back. And it's like those very tiny moments. They're not long. Those are not long sentences. They're not long statements, but they're so good. So I think Marin is a big time, a standout in this game. And so is Cal. You can't have Marin kind of like talking Cal down from these things and her being so good if you don't already have Cal being a great character and that he has to deal with all this, right? So he's phenomenal. Seer dying again. I actually kind of predicted that Seer would die. I made a video about that a few weeks ago, so I guess I got that one right. I didn't know Vader would kill her, but I did predict that she would die. That felt right, her being the master, the more wiser one. It felt right for her to be the one to fight Vader, so that was great. The Dagon Ravis thing, I think we saw in reviews, or I saw in reviews leading in, people talking about how the villains in this game, the best ones, are the ones that the trailers and stuff didn't focus on. And I actually agree with that. Now, I think Dagon is a very important villain, with Santari and the Tanalor and all that, right? He's extremely important to this game. But ultimately, Bode is, he is the one. That betrayal is the big moment in the game. Him fighting Cal a couple different times, right? Him being a Jedi that survived, like all that stuff. That is the big moment, in Jedi Survivor. And Bode Bode's story of why he did it and how he escaped, or how, he didn't get caught after Order 66. Like, he is the main villain. Now, I think because of that, Dagon gets a little, underlooked or overlooked, either one, right? They don't look at him enough. He's solid. I like Dagon. I like that you fight him. It's the rule of threes, right? So you fight him 3 times and you defeat him on the 3rd time. Ravis, I think he's a cool character, but he is not used, enough at all. But again, I think it's because, okay, it's a smoke and mirror. We're trying to set up these 2, or at least Dagon, and then when they're gone, and you think you've won, we're actually going to throw one curveball. Not Vader, he is a curveball, but actually Bode, right? He's the villain of this game. So I thought they did a really good job, and I was upset. Like, I was sad. I was kind of with Cal, where it's like, Jesus, Bode, like, we were together, we worked for this together, just give me that compass and we'll all live on Tanalorr, peacefully, and he just won't do it. So you want him to be along with him, because I do think there was a side of Bode that liked Cal. I think you can see that in the echoes that you find in the game. There's moments where you can say, okay, I think he liked Cal. He wanted to actually get Cal out of it entirely by shipping him with Marin, but ultimately, he's kind of just too stubborn in that way. So those are some huge moments in this game. I think they're really, really good, and I think they do a good job with them. So I would say those are what makes this game like elite, because you already have the combat being so good, and then you have some really great character and story moments that do make it, I do believe, a Game of the Year contender. Now, everything else, again, the world's being a bit too big and all that, those bring it down to earth a little bit. So overall, I don't know, like, do I love the game? I think most of the game I loved. I'd say loved is probably the right word. I think it's just, again, like I said, just a few steps away. There's just a few things holding this game back from being one of the best Star Wars, not just Star Wars, but also, an actual Game of the Year. There's a few things holding it back, but it's pretty darn close. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure you guys are subscribed, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.